All engines of the second Focus are quite unpretentious, but there are nuances. For example, they don't have hydraulic compensators at all. By the way, we have a detailed review for each of these engines: 1.4 MPI ASDA, ASDB 80 horsepower, 1.6 MPI SHDA, HWDA 100 horsepower, 1.6 MPI Ti-VCT HXDA, SYDA 115 horsepower. Gasoline engines with a displacement of 1.4 and 1.6 liters are the simplest and most reliable. The main thing is not to skip replacing the timing belt. If the belt is not original, then it should be changed every 80,000 kilometers. And you shouldn't skimp on oil, because this will aggravate the problem with the rustling of the pistons when shifting. The 115 horsepower 1.6 liter engine drives more vigorously, but once every 200,000 kilometers it may require replacing the phase shifters. 1.8 MPI Q7DA QQDA 125 horsepower, 2.0 MPI AODE SIDA 145 horsepower. Older gasoline engines with a displacement of 1.8 and 2.0 liters are equipped with a long-life timing chain drive, but their throttle valves are not the best. There are problems with the valves in the intake manifold. The plastic valve cover gasket requires attention, otherwise the spark plugs will drown in oil. The 1.8-liter engine has a tendency to consume oil, which is sometimes treated by replacing the piston rings if the cylinder geometry is not damaged. The 2.0-liter engine usually does not suffer from this, but sooner or later its partner, the dual-mass flywheel, will rustle. We provided more details in separate reviews of these engines. 2.5 Turbo ST, HYDA 225 horsepower, 2.5 Turbo RS, JZDA 300 horsepower, 2.5 Turbo RS 500 JZDA 350 horsepower. Charged Ford Focus II is equipped with an inline turbo 5 from Volvo. And this engine, with all its power, is even less troublesome than inline naturally aspirated 4s, 1.8C, KKDA, KKDB 115 horsepower. Diesel Ford Focus is much less common, almost all of them were imported from Europe. The 1.8-liter diesel engine is the brainchild of Ford and is distinguished by an archaic design in which common rail injection was introduced. Its 8-valve cylinder head is cast iron, and there are 2 chains in the timing drive. Moreover, since 2008, the lower chain has been replaced with a timing belt. Yes, the timing belt bathed in oil on Fords appeared long before the liter EcoBoosts. Overall, this is a really reliable and durable engine. 2.0C G6DG G6DA, G6DB, G6DD 136 horsepower. The 2-liter diesel is a French engine, well known from Peugeot and Citroën. The Focus II is equipped with its 16-valve version DW10 TID4. An absolutely reliable motor if it was not cut off by the previous owners. IB5 5-street manual transmission, with engines with a displacement of 1.4 to 1.8 liters. The old 5-speed was installed. Manual transmission IB5. Paired with the 1.8 engine, it serves poorly. Starts with slipping kill the differential, splitting the pinion axles and piercing the transmission housing. In addition, shaft bearings and bushings wear out. The differential can be strengthened with improved satellite axles, or an improved differential can be installed, even with self-locking. Problem with the fragility of the IB5 is so pressing that owners of 1.8-liter Focuses spend money on installing another 5-speed manual transmission, which is paired with a 2-liter engine. In addition to the gearbox itself, you need to install suitable axle shafts, a starter, a kit with a clutch basket, a dual-mass flywheel and release bearing, cables, and even a lower engine mount. There is also an option to keep the clutch basket and single-mass flywheel from IB5, but you need to machine a specific spacer for the flywheel. MTX75 5-speed manual transmission. A more reliable manual transmission is the MTX75. It is installed with a 2-liter gasoline engine. You just need to monitor the tightness of the seals and change the oil at least once every 75,000 kilometers. MMT6 6-speed manual transmission with diesel engines. M66 6-speed manual transmission with 2.5 turbo, with diesel engines with a displacement of 1.8 and 2.0 liters, as well as on Charged Focus ST and RS 6-speed engines work. Manual transmission. They are different, but reliable. 4F27E 4-stage automatic transmission. By the standards of the mid-2000s, the Focus II did not have a fast and modern automatic transmission. This car carried over the old 4-speed, early versions of which appeared on the Ford Escort. But this transmission is very reliable and inexpensive to repair. True, repairing a worn valve body can be very expensive. To save on its restoration, refresh the ATF every 60,000 kilometers. It takes about 5 liters of Dexron 6 type ATF to fill. The filter is accessible after removing the pan. The hood latch is located directly behind the Ford emblem, and this is not the best solution. In slushy weather, water can get into the lock cylinder, and then it will freeze there. In addition, the rod from the cylinder to the lock often falls off or breaks. After this, it will not be possible to open the hood without special tools and skills. The rod can be replaced with a new non-original one, FO 13,055,231. Antifreeze leaks can be expected both through burst pipes under the expansion tank and through the pipes to the heater radiator, but in another place, at the junction with the engine shield. The O-rings in these quick-release couplings disintegrate, but they are not sold separately. But the rings, 1,310,351, installed in the cylinder head of Ford engines are ideal here. After 12 to 15 years of operation, you can expect the expansion tank to crack. In general, if a web of cracks is noticed in the plastic, then it is better to replace the tank, 1,425,193, preventively. Often cracks appear on its bottom. Ford Focus II was equipped with both a hydraulic and electro-hydraulic steering rack. Conventional hydraulics went to cars with engines with a displacement of 1.4 and 1.6 liters, and all others received electric racks. Both options are quite reliable, but a rack with an electric pump can upset you if the control board for this pump breaks down. More often than not, this pump makes a distinct hum due to wear on the bearings. You can drive with this noise for quite a long time. A humming electric power steering pump can be replaced with a used one, but it is possible to replace its bearings. And don't forget to change the oil in both versions of the amplifier system at least once every 2 years. This will significantly extend their life and protect them from freezing in severe frost. Naturally, the condensate that has collected and mixed with the oil freezes. The suspension of the second-generation Ford Focus is simple and reliable. It doesn't stand out in anything remarkable, but, and this is an indisputable fact, these cars drive quickly, naturally and safely. Not for very long, 50,000 kilometers, stabilizer struts are installed in the front suspension. The original ones, 1,686,594, cost $55. Levers, namely their silent blocks and ball joints, last longer, sometimes 200,000 kilometers or more. The ball joints are removable and easy to change. But the original, 1,679,384, today costs $150, and numerous substitutes sell for $20. The rear silent blocks of these front control arms are also 1,883,046, sold separately for $50. Substitutes are 2 or more times cheaper. Front silent blocks are offered only from non-original manufacturers. Good substitutes cost $10. Let's pay attention to the support bearing, 1,701,597, of the right axle shaft. It lasts about 200,000 kilometers. If worn, it becomes a source of vibration during movement. The rear suspension has 4 levers for each wheel. Focus II did not have any beams. The silent blocks of the rear levers last more than 200,000 kilometers, so the first time you need to replace them, you will have to cut off all the mounting bolts. Only the front trailing arm silent blocks, 1,061,670, are sold separately. The original ones cost $30. The lower bone arm, 1,061,668, costs about $30, and the spring-loaded one, 1,357,319, costs $100. But the upper wishbone, 1,253,737, is very expensive, about $450. There are many analogs and substitutes for everything. There is even a set of 6 wishbones and mounting bolts for them, which cost the same $450. In general, as a rule, the rear suspension of the Focus II should be changed entirely, so as not to climb into it for the next 200,000 kilometers and even more. On almost all Focus IIs, although this of course depends on the climate, the ears at the upper supports, 1,300,459, of the rear shock absorbers broke off. After this, a loud rumble appears in the rear suspension closer to the trunk. These supports are sold separately. The original top supports cost $140, but replacements are available for $10. All wheel bearings are included with the hubs. The front bearings are rather weak, and today the original version, 1,471,854, costs $260, replacements cost $50. Rear hubs, 1,766,628, $50 each. Support bearings 1,508,111 of the front struts cost $45, and they usually last 100,000 kilometers. The body metal of the second-generation Ford Focus is galvanized, so it is not in much danger of rust. However, in those places where the paint and the zinc layer are worn away, corrosion appears. Those under attack are the sills, the lower edges of the doors, the edges of the arches, areas of painted metal under the plastic, i.e. behind the mudguards and behind the moldings. On pre-restyling Ford Focus II, a problem occurs with the instrument panel, and not only do panel glitches and CAN bus errors appear, but the engine also does not start. If you hit the visor above the instrument panel, all errors and symptoms may disappear. This is all caused by a cracked solder pin. Fixing the breakdown is very simple, using a soldering iron. The instrument panel itself can be removed and disassembled without much difficulty. Often on a Ford Focus, antifreeze leaks through the pipes to the heater radiator. You can find out about this by the presence of antifreeze on the floor under the navigator's feet. The leak occurs at the connection of the tubes with the tubes from the radiator. You can seal this place using the original rings, 1,342,708, and clamps, 1,454,337, or any other available method. Sometimes cracks appear in the radiator of the stove itself, then it will have to be replaced or welded, whichever is more profitable for you.